Okay, thanks for joining us as we continue to look down memory lane and going back some 20 years to that season of 2003-2004. We've caught up with Martin Rowlands already, and I'm delighted to say that myself and Andy Sinton are joined this afternoon here in W12 by none other than Clarke Carlisle. Clarke, thanks so much for travelling down to join us this afternoon to reminisce about 20 years ago. Does it feel like 20 years?
It doesn't, you know. Why can I say that? It doesn't, and it does. Like when we talk about it, it feels like yesterday. But then when you think about the things that have happened in the interim, it feels like a lifetime ago. But before we start, I've got to say, you have got the most wonderful broadcaster's voice.
Yes.
I just heard you.
I like that.
You just switched that on then, didn't you? As soon as like roll camera, and here we go. That is beautiful.
Yes, you can come again. Yeah. Let's keep that in the edit.
And you haven't heard me yet.
But looking back on that 20 years, of course, you got the opportunity to meet up with your former teammates at a special event in Chiswick. And I've said it before, but how Andy Sinton managed to get all you lot in one room for one night only was one hell of an achievement. But how special was that for you to see those guys?
It must have been like herding cats. Was it bad?
It took quite a lot of time, but it was to see you guys together, Clarke. It was amazing. You know, the auditorium where you're doing the Q&A, that's great, but to see behind the scenes in that room hugging each other after so long. But go on, what was it like?
It was awesome. I mean, it was hard enough getting us all to training, never mind doing an event like that. There are some dressing rooms and some teams that you form a bond with that is almost inexplicable. You know, I can't explain why all of us came together like that. And to be quite honest, it's really hard to explain why the relationship that I've got with that squad grew the way it did. You know, the only thing that I can put it down to is the level of adversity that we were going through at that time as a club. And as a player, it was kind of like, well, it's down us then. You know, oftentimes you can think, oh, the chairman's going to buy this person, buy that person, or the gaffer's going to do this, gaffer's going to do that. But we had Ollie. It was just an incredible man, a bundle of charisma. But that group of players, and especially the bonds we formed in our units, the back four that I had in that specific year was exceptional. You know, I mean, I was here for 4 years. And I didn't play for 1.5 of those, you know, because I was injured. But there were probably like 5 or 6 different iterations of back four that I played in. And it was very specifically Gino Padula, myself, Danny Shittu and Terrell Forbes. The 4 of us clicked I've maybe experienced it once since in my footballing career. And it was just like a brotherhood. You know, it was utterly incredible. There was a belief in what the other person would do for you.
Yeah, which is important, isn't it?
Oh, it's incredibly
That's important in any successful team.
It's
There's partnerships and trust.
Important.
Trust
Yeah,
is huge.
definitely.
How is that relationship formed between the 4 of you? Is it something that just clicks? Is it down to personalities as much as abilities?
I think there's a number of ingredients. I mean, when we talk about it, we want a single strand answer, don't we? We want like, oh, we all used to do this together, you know. It was like, oh, we all had dinner on a Sunday and that was it. It was beautiful. No, there were a number of different things. And one factor that I have seen in successful teams is the self-motivation to fully apply yourself. So when I went out on the pitch, I knew that I didn't have to coax and cajole Gino to give his best. I knew I didn't have to coax and cajole Danny to cover round for me or to retreat from a set piece. Whereas there are a number of sides, and even here at QPR, there were several players who I had to absolutely lambast in order for them to not just switch on, but just to do the basics of their job. And when you've got that doubt in the person next to you, that then, that transfers doubt into yourself because You walk out onto the pitch thinking, I have to do a job and a half today because this muppet here ain't going to do his full job. You know, whereas conversely, when you're in a side with players like that 4 that I named, I knew, all right, I'm going to give everything today, but I know if I make a mistake, Danny and Gino are going to clean up for me. T's going to clean up for me. You know, so it almost gives you a level of, a bit of breathing space.
And I bet that confidence just swept through all the players that are in front of you when you've got that behind you.
So I'm going to go back a point. The squad was incredibly together in our units. So there was a togetherness between those attacking players where actually we probably didn't really eat breakfast together.
Right.
You know, we all socialise together, to use Andy's very polite term. You know, but when you're talking on a daily context, we were the defence. And that was our job. And we knew it. And we were proud of it.
Yeah.
And we did it well. And because we did it well, it kind of... We expected them to do their job. And our strikers took that. You know, sometimes you can have... if I made a mistake... You can have a striker that throws his arms in the air and really tosses it off because I made a mistake as a defender. Chris Kiwami was one of those. Yeah.
Without naming names.
Yeah, I just remember it, you know. And he really... The reason why I remember Chris is because he was a senior pro when I came here and I was a very young player, 20 years old, of age. And it had a really detrimental effect on me. You know, the way that he reacted and responded in certain match situations. I vividly remember that. Whereas in the side in 03, 04, rather than lambast us, they kind of stepped up to make amends in the way that they could. And when your strikers do that, again, it allows you to breathe as a defender because you might go one down, but we're going to crack on doing our job because we know that we're going to score. Yeah. You know, they're going to make amends for it, yeah. And then in the middle of the park, we had so much energy and ability. I think we probably had one of the most technically capable midfields that division has seen. You know, I know Langer's left, but he was there starting it. Martin Rowlands is one of my most cherished signings at this club. Really admired him from afar when he was over at the Four Corners. And then when he came to our place and I actually saw, I admired his energy. Mm-hmm. You know, oftentimes as a player, you admire someone who reflects that trait you want to kind of portray the most, doesn't it? And as a player, I always wanted to be consistent, reliable, and just energetic. I'm going to give you everything from minute 1 to minute 90. I don't want to come off the pitch with anyone being able to ask any questions about how much work I did. Question my ability. Yeah, I'll make mistakes. Yeah. But don't question the fact that I didn't track that runner or I didn't make this. Rowley, him and Birch were just absolutely phenomenal. You know, I admired them as players, and then I was blessed to be in the side of them.
When you look at that season, going into that season, you obviously joined us in the summer of 2000, and it was someone that Mr. Sinton holds in very high regard in Jerry Francis, who actually signed you. And then within 6 or 8 months, Jerry had been replaced in the dugout by Ian Holloway. So in terms of that happening in season 1, which ultimately ended in relegation, for you, how was that transition going from, because from the outside looking in, if you like, Jerry Francis and Ian Holloway seem 2 very different characters. In terms of their man management, managerial style, was it very different? I mean, I think I know the answer, but I'm just here to ask questions.
Wow. Well, yeah, you know, talk about chalk and cheese. Jerry, I am forever grateful to Jerry. He took me from Blackpool, and the club didn't have much money at the time, and he took a punt on me, you know, to bring me down here. And I remember he told me it was at Bagshot Country Hotel, so that's where he wined and dined me for my meeting. And he said, "Look, I'll bring you." He said, "But you need to wait." He said, "You've got to wait for your chance in my team. I've got experienced internationals." And I was youngest ever England captain. Is that right, Joe? I didn't know that. So you know, he laid it out. He was like, "You've got to work hard to get in my side." But that was beautiful for me. You know, that just kind of resonated with everything that I wanted to do. And then we get here and we work hard. Des Bulpin was the coach, wasn't he?
Des,
Yeah, we work hard. And Joe would, at Twyford Avenue, he'd peer out of the window at the top office with a cup of tea and a biscuit. He'd be like, "Hey, hit the lines, hit the lines!"
Or was that on the Tuesdays?
Yeah, on Tuesdays, on Terror Tuesdays,
yeah.
shouted out the window. Conversely, you get someone like Ollie who comes in, and Ollie is catch me at the lines. He's doing all the running with us. You know, so that I think, you know, kind of exemplifies the different styles. Ollie was in there, and he never asked you to do anything that he wouldn't have done himself or couldn't do himself. I found that Jerry, and he reminded us of it, you know, on a frequent basis. He says, "I'm not used to working with this." And he would say it on the training ground. You know, if Doozy gets something wrong, we used to have. We used to have match analysis, obviously, on a Monday. So in the early days of this, you know, they'd show a clip and he'd pause it and he'd just point to a shadow in a corner and he'd go, Barra, is that you? And it was always Ian Barraclough. Oh, brilliant. But, and you flip to the other side of the coin and the other end of the spectrum. We had Kenny Jackett alongside Ollie. And Kenny was a coach. I used to call them Pinky and the Brain. Because Ollie was Pinky. He wanted to take over the world, and he had all the energy and the charisma to do it. But Kenny was the brain, and Kenny worked really closely with us as a defensive unit. And rather than putting 45 minutes up, which is what we used to watch whole matches often, rather than putting whole matches up and then just exposing people, saying you're sorry, language. So, you know, you're rubbish. Ken would just break it down into maybe 6 incidents, and he'd show it, and he'd say, "What do you think about that, lads?" And we'd look at it, we'd be like, "We think we defended that all right, Ken." He'd be like, "Yeah, because you did." So look, you're all in great positions there. Why did you take up that position? And you told me, "Oh," it's like, "Yeah." So he'd affirm the good things you did, and they'd be like, "And what about this?" You're like, "Oh, that was not so good, is it, Ken?" So he encouraged like a self-awareness in what we were doing on the pitch as a unit, rather than just shaming people in front of the entire squad. And in doing that, I think this contributes to the first thing that we were talking about why we were so close. We actually learned together.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't learn by shaming. We learned by watching ourselves do things well. And then we took that onto the training pitch and onto the pitch. So you ask about the difference between Jerry and Kenny, Jerry and Ollie. 2 incredibly different characters, and that's not to say that one was better than the other.
Just different.
What it's to say is that one managerial type suited a certain type of player, and I think Jerry would excel with a full squad of globe-trotting internationals, you know, because he represented that. Mm-hmm. Whereas the squad that we had, there weren't superstars. You know, there were some players who excelled in certain different areas, but there was a unity where it was more about what we give for the team. And Ollie exemplified that. You know, so I think the group complemented the managerial traits.
And do you think the team spirit that went into 03-04 was, in the main, not completely, but in the main, built by the previous challenges, whether it was the relegation, the administration, the so near but yet so far playoff heartache going into that season. A lot of you had been through that together.
We had, the vast majority of us had come through that together.
And it could have gone the other way, right?
Definitely. You see it so often, don't you? Teams lose a playoff final and then get relegated the next year. Well, before we get to that, so I go from Jerry Francis and I get injured halfway through that season.
Yeah.
I'm out for 18 months.
Yeah, horrible.
Now, in that interim, when I come back to training, it's almost like I've signed for a new club. There are there's a handful of players who are still there from Jerry's era.
Almost starting again.
Yeah, it's totally. So I come into a whole new team, and to them, I'm a new signing as well. So it built from there, and then through that season, 02-03, getting to the playoff final. Do you know, that was such a disgusting experience. It really was. It was my first experience of a major, event, a major footballing event, and the occasion was so massive, and the kit was so beautiful. Was it supposed to be a replica of the cup-winning kit? Because we're all in white. Was it a kit?
I would have to defer to Chris Guy, our historian.
I'm pretty sure it was like a replica of the kit that they won the cup in the 60s. Yeah. It was a beautiful kit. It's one of my most favourite QPR kits and career kits. And do you know what, bizarrely, when we came off, I was gutted for that fact. I was like, and it was such a nice kit. We'll never wear that kit again, and it'll be solid in my memory. We so should have won that game.
Did that spur you on so you come back, you've got that disappointment.
I don't think he has got over the disappointment now.
Yeah.
I haven't. I missed a glaring opportunity. Honestly, I came marauding out from the back, Andy. Wasn't even a set piece.
Yeah, what would you
and I still dream about that moment now. Just like Ollie still goes on about Tommy squaring it, does he? It was Tommy squaring. You know, there are certain things that live with you.
Yeah, stay in your mind.
Yeah. Did
that disappointment? So you come back, you go away, you're all disappointed. You go away on your holidays, you come back. From day one of pre-season, was the group, was that going to be used to spur you on, or was it not really spoke about? You're starting again, you've got to go and do it all over again. How was that pre-season after the big, massive disappointment?
If it was left to us as players, I don't think it would have spurred us on, because it hurt. It really hurt. Yeah. We were wounded.
Yeah.
I think the way that Ken and Ollie managed it, it served as
a motivation thing. Yeah.
Well, Ollie motivated us on it. Kenny used the whole thing as a learning experience.
Yeah.
You know, and he didn't just draw aspects out of the final game. He would draw aspects out from the season.
Yeah.
You know, and he'd draw similarities in what we were coming up against. And the majority of the squad were still, relatively young players. I think Kev was probably the most senior player, Kevin Palms maybe, and so for us, to use it as a learning experience in what was our first kind of, trophy event, I think is probably one of the most influential aspects of that experience in our careers. Because rather than being left to deal with it or being shamed by it, Kenny allowed us to learn from it, and then that kind of makes you feel that subsequent failures don't have to be failures. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You can come back again. Yeah. That's not to say that we didn't doubt over the course of that season, but there were a couple of players who were absolutely adamant that it wouldn't happen again.
Who were they?
Kevin Birchie. Kevin Birchie were...
Did they hurt the most because of their connection with the club as supporters?
That's a really good question, and you should ask them on the next episode. What I do know is that they would talk about it when they were saying, like, if it was half time, and we're one down, they'd be like, it's not happening again. You know, that would be their point of reference to bring into that game, irrespective of what happened in the first half. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it almost wasn't put in the past, it was brought on the journey of the 03-04
Oh, definitely,
season.
yeah, in a number of different ways.
So bearing in mind, like you just said, as players we came back, we were still all hurting, and effort was made from the management team to sort of use it as motivation. But aside from all that, how important was the first game of the season to win 5-0 against Blackpool to kickstart it?
Perfect. You know, you talk about trying to put things to bed. Like I've just said, it didn't put the whole thing to bed, but it kind of set aside some of the fears of that next season syndrome. You know, how are we gonna respond in this circumstance?
And everyone's looking.
Of course they are. Everyone's looking from not only from the stands, but from the outside of the game.
Outside,
Everyone from the outside of the club is looking, and the fact that it was my former club, you know, I was like, ooh, buzzing. Because if I remember rightly, they'd just come back up, hadn't they? They'd just gotten promoted. So there were a couple of different things we were fighting. Our hangover and their momentum. And everyone's looking at that, and we absolutely dispatched them. And that first game of the season is really quite a pivotal one. It really is, because everyone's been starved of football for six weeks. Well, in our case, it was like 4.5 weeks, wasn't it? Everyone's been starved of football for 4.5 weeks. You've had your pre-season, you've really put all the work in. And on that day at 3 p.m, you walk out on there and the roar is insane. I can't remember the weather, but it's usually baking up. And in that moment, anything is possible. No matter what club you're at, no matter what league you're in.
No, you don't know, do you?
You don't know, and you're like, this is it. This is what I've been working for. Let's go. You know, and I remember at Burnley a couple of years later, well, I'll say a couple, probably about 10 years later, you got that feeling, you're like, yeah, anything's possible. And you're 3 down in 6 minutes. And then everything's just like, psst, you know, like one of them bouncy castles. You just see the whole team just go like this. But conversely, you know, you go out there and you absolutely batter a team and you come in bouncing. You're like,
Did that one game in isolation, so you've had your disappointment, you've done your pre-season, you come back, you're never quite sure what you're going to get, you put in that type of performance, you win, you score 5, you keep a clean sheet. Did that almost go, okay, right, we can do something this year, we can actually go one better? Or was that not really in the mindset so early in that season?
Was it in the mindset? We're talking 20 years ago, right? So forgive me if I give a bit of poetic or artistic license to this. No. We went into that season believing we could win the league as players. A club the size of QPR, the players we had in the squad, irrespective of what was going on externally, we knew we had enough.
Yeah.
Equally, we knew that the year before. And not only had we fallen short of promotion, we'd fallen short of the little end of season soiree as well, on a global scale. So doubt was there.
Yeah.
We know we should, and doubt was there. So that first game, rather than making us think, yeah, we're going to win the league, it was like, whew, yeah, okay. You know, maybe we are decent. So we've got more to do.
Yep.
And you talk about the confidence you got from that win, and I suppose there is that nagging doubt, however far you want to put it, to the back of your mind about what happened last season. We want to use it as motivation, but we fell short, and then we fell short again. Do you recall, and I appreciate it's 20 years ago, whether there was a period during that season where you started to have doubts or a wobble, or there was a concern? Because obviously Plymouth ultimately went on to win the division. You had Bristol City, who went on a 11-game winning run over Christmas and into February, where they suddenly shot right up and were right in amongst it, and suddenly the battle was on.
I hated Bristol City as well. Not as much as Ollie, but I really did, yeah.
Do you recall doubts?
Yeah, and again, there are factors that contribute to my doubts that might differ from the other lads. You know, you have to remember that I think it was the end of August, no, the middle of September, I went into rehab for 28 days. So I went into alcohol rehab because I'd turned up for the bus, travelling to somewhere, I can't even remember, still stinking of ale from the night before, and Ollie threw me off the bus. And you know, the club were going to sack me, you know. Did you know?
No.
No. So I'd turned up for the bus. I think it was to travel and go overnight. So
were your teammates and Ollie, etc., aware of the challenges you were going through at that time, at that point?
See, we say now challenges. At the time, they and I just thought I was being an idiot.
Right.
You know, just thought, oh, he's just having a drink. He loves it. And that's what I thought as well, you know. And it gets to the point where it's interfering with, you know, the way that I train, and then finally breaking kind of that final taboo of turning up for the bus still stinking from the night before. Ollie had had enough, and he threw me off the bus. He said, you can come in tomorrow and train with the kids. So it must have been a Friday to travel for an overnight, but I didn't turn up to train for the kids because Ollie had thrown me off the bus. And to me, my world had just ended.
Right.
Because I've been caught, exposed, it's all done. And then I remember calling him on the Sunday. I've been out for 2 days straight since he threw me off the bus. And he said, all right, son, he said, what's going on? I said, Ollie, I don't know. I said, I genuinely don't know. I said, I just can't say no. And he said, right, I don't know the answer, but we'll find someone who does. And it was only because Ollie called the PFA. I didn't call them. Ollie called the PFA, who put me in touch with Sporting Chance, and they offered me a place immediately. It had only just been set up by Tony Adams, so it wasn't the big thing that it is now. You know, there was only Tony. In fact, I'm not even sure. Yeah, there was only Tony who had been through the system,
right.
But it wasn't at Sporting Chance. He'd set that up, and it was only because I said yes to going into the clinic on that Monday that I kept my job. Otherwise, the club were going to sack me. So I go away to clinic for 28 days. I come back with the tag of an alcoholic. So you asked me about were there any times of doubts and fear. My gosh, I had doubts and fear over my entire career in that moment coming back. You know, I had doubts not only whether QPR would let me back in the door, but whether the lads would accept me, whether I'd still be good enough to play. And if that was a no, then being kicked out of QPR in Old Div 2 through drink in 2001, I was finished. Utterly finished, you know. So the personal doubts in me were off the scale. Absolutely off the scale. Now, the only reason that this worked in my favour was because it put me in the position that I've been in all my life where I've had to prove myself. You know, I've never operated well as a big fish in a small pond, ever. I've always had to, or not always, I've thrived when I've had to prove myself to others, when I've had to show that I can do this, I can do that, And at that point in time, I had to prove myself to myself first, then I had to win over my teammates, then I had to win over my gaffer, then I had to win over the club and the fans, and then the game. So, did I have doubts? I had all-consuming doubts, yet I was in the perfect position for me to manage them. Because we had a job to do, and I had to do something very specific to contribute to it.
Do you remember your first day back?
No. No, I don't. But not the first day specifically, no. I remember like a few certain early interactions, and the early interactions that were significant, they weren't actually with the guy, what I would say were my peers. Mm-hmm. You know, it wasn't with the likes of Danny and T. It was actually with the people who I viewed as senior players and over and above me. And it was my interactions with Birch, with Kev and with Palms that were significant to me. Because to me they signified like an authority level in and amongst our team. And the way that they they didn't treat me any different as a player. Mm-hmm. That was amazing to me. Mm-hmm. But more than that, Birch and Palms especially, they made considerations for me when they wanted to organise socials and stuff like that. And that meant so much to me. That meant so much, because without actually saying, you know, all of those things that you might have wanted to hear, like, you know, come here, Clarke, we're all big boys, da 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 da. Nowadays, you might expect that, you know, there might be more open in the communication, but they evidenced to me that I was no different, that I hadn't let them down, and that they still believed that I could do a job and I was part of the team, and that meant the world to me. You know, at that point in time, and for many years afterwards, actually, my self-esteem, it was on its backside, you know, irrespective of what I was doing on the pitch. The only thing that gave me value was you telling me I was good enough, or you making me feel, you know, accepted. And that's exactly what they did for me. And that got me through a really tough period.
How were the fans?
Incredible. Yeah, I received so many cards and letters, you know. I still have them. Right now they're in storage because I told you, you know, we're in between houses, but I still have 3 boxes. 1 box is from that period in the clinic, and 2 boxes are from when I was in psych hospital in 2014. And the love that was poured out by the QPR fans, especially at that time, this was 2001, don't forget. You know, this is 2001 when the Sun and John Gregory were still lambasting Stan Collymore for saying, he's got depression, or he might have some kind of, oh, he's on 60 grand a week. You know, the understanding wasn't there. Yet that support and that love, it was seemingly unconditional, you know, for me. The fans just wrapped themselves around me, and it was immense. It was utterly immense.
You have kept 3 boxes. You know exactly where they are, mm-hmm. even between houses, and that's an achievement in itself. Why have you kept them?
Oh, what a really good question. Initially, it was out of respect. It was like, people have taken their time to support me in this, and you know, what am I going to do? Just throw it in the bin? I'm at my lowest, you know. So just put them there because people have taken the time for that. And then it was only actually years later where I appreciated the value of them, you know. So it wasn't just the act that they of what they'd done. I actually went back and read them. It took me months. Yeah. It took me months because I would read these letters and these cards and I would break down, because these people were offering love and support that I didn't feel worthy of. No, not just at the time, but subsequently, you know, I made a suicide attempt in 2001. when I did my knee injury here at QPR. And from there, I developed depression. But I didn't know about it. No one else knew about it. So I'm living with depression that puts me in this position of cyclical self-loathing, of cyclical, feeling worthless and less than. And so for another 10 years, I would go through huge periods of feeling like I'm not worthy of attention, not worthy of someone's love or affection, and stuff like that. And these represented just an unfettered outpouring of love and esteem that I didn't feel worthy of. So reading through them, it was like, every one of them, I was like, how could you think that of me? Da, 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 da. And I'm talking 6, 7, 8 years down the line.
Wow.
So to get another, so many in 2014 and more from QPR fans at that time, it was probably after 4 years of therapy. So it was the year before lockdown, I was able to go through all of them.
Wow.
And again, there was a lot of emotion. But at this point, because I'd done all of my therapy and I've made my personal growth and I know my value in the world, I had a level of appreciation for them and I could accept them. And that's what made me so excited about this reunion, because even though it's 20 years ago, it was only 2 years ago that I was reflecting on the outpouring of love and affection that this ground and these people showed me when I was on my arse.
That's amazing, and it's brilliant to see you doing so well, and it was great to have you as part of that event. And what you were saying off camera before we started was you were shocked by how revered you all are as a team. So you've gone on to win promotion twice to the Premier League, you won the Championship, you won at Wembley, and you thought that would be trumped and therefore pushed to the side. But it shows the connection the fans have had and have with that group of players.
Definitely. I was utterly amazed at how we were received. For, like I said to you, for a side that finished second, and seeing in subsequently years, won the Championship, won a Championship playoff final. And I've seen at other clubs, when your achievement is gesund, you kind of fall down the pecking order, But the way that we were received by the fans at that reunion, and then again at the pitch, on the Saturday, it really blessed my heart. It was incredible, because it was significant for us, but the club has moved on from that time. And just sat in the in reception down there, I was just looking at the managerial roll call that's on the wall. My goodness, when Ollie left, there was about, 7 or 8 years of just absolute churnage. When managers were like cannon fodder. What was that? But so, I look at that and I look at the disruption that the fans have had to go through over that period of time, because with each manager comes almost a change in identity in and around the club, Not for QPR as a whole, but the manager's influence, it affects what the team does, how the team interact with the fans. It affects what the personnel at the club, portray, looking out, looking forward and out of house. And it must have been a period of really quite significant turmoil. So when I look at that, I think, maybe we were actually the sane ones.
Going back to those two events that we staged, the Thursday night and the Saturday, you might have seen some of those boys from time to time, but was there anyone you hadn't seen for a considerable amount of time? And I've already said, the backstage stuff that no one sees, that's priceless for me, where you bump into someone, you give them a hug, the stories are flying left, right and centre, a lot of love for each other, a lot of mutual respect for each other. Was there anyone in that group that you hadn't seen for a while?
It will probably surprise you, but the two who I hadn't seen in the longest time were Danny Shittu and Terrell Forbes.
Oh, wow.
You know, and they
Two that you were really close to.
Closest to.
Yeah.
The two that I was closest to were the two that I hadn't seen in the longest period of time. It's really hard to explain, right? You form a bond within a team, and you become brothers. You will have experienced this, Andy, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. And then when you leave, when you're transferred, it's overnight.
It's gone, yeah.
You know, it is literally overnight. I mean, the example I use is at Burnley. I turned up for at Watford. Sorry, I turned up for a midweek cup match. I was captain. I got to the players' tunnel, the players' entrance, and the gaffer was there, and he said, "I've sold you to Burnley." I was like, "Oh, okay." Went to walk past him. He's like, "Where are you going?" I was like, "I've got a game in an hour." Gaffer, he's like, No, you're up the road." So having left home to turn up for a game, I leave the ground, drive up to Burnley, sign the contract, stay in a hotel overnight, and I'm training with Burnley the next morning.
Yeah, new chapter.
And I ring the missus, I'm like, "Right, we're off to Burnley." She's like, "When?" So I'm like, "Now." You know, that's it, pack your stuff, you're coming up tomorrow. So it's immediate.
Yeah.
It's utterly immediate. And these people who I just formed that bond with, overnight, they're my enemy.
Yeah.
You know, you're now my adversary, and I don't want you to do well. So even though you form these professional bonds that can grow greater than that, they're single serving, and they're temporal.
Yeah.
And that's what happened, because I was, as the tabloids put it, a journeyman veteran. I was only 27, but a journeyman veteran. When you get around, 11 clubs in a career, then everyone, it just becomes a single-serving friend or a single-serving, professional partner for that period of time. I could probably count on one hand the number of genuine, lasting friendships that I made in football. Now, hear me, like friendships, as you would, classify a friendship in the public.
Yeah.
I had some wonderful working relationships with guys who I consider brothers, who I would still fight for, but they weren't friendships.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
100%.
And it actually, it took me at least 2-3, it took me 4 years to reclassify what a friend is when I left football. So, there'd be people I'd meet playing golf and stuff, and then I get home to Carrie, I'd be like, they're texting me. They're asking me for what? Why do you want to talk to me? We finished golf. It's kind of. I expected relationships to happen in a certain way at a certain time, and I expect this from you, and you expect this from me, and it was just all blown out the water. In fact, 3 people. I have 3 friends from football.
Wow. I mean, the next question is to ask who, but I'm not going to ask who because it'll upset hundreds of others. We could talk all afternoon, but I must ask you about Hillsborough. A lot is said about the game itself, and that's been spoken about in great and in huge detail. I don't know if mixed emotions would be the right words for you, because obviously the target was achieved, but obviously you came off at half-time in that game.
I did, and I mentioned this when we had the Q&A evening. What a lot of people may not expect is that I came off at half-time and the lads went out for the second half, and the relief that I felt was utterly incredible. The relief that I felt, because I think we were 1-0 up, weren't we? Were we? The relief that I felt that burden wasn't on me, because when we got to that game, just everything that we were saying earlier, we know we should get promoted. We know we're good enough. We've failed the year before.
But now it's on one game.
And now it's, again, it all rides on one game. And then if we hadn't have won that game, we were going to have to go through last year's debacle again. You know, and there's no guarantee that you know, as we experienced the year before. So my sheer relief that I'd come off, the burden wasn't on me, and I'd come off when we're in a winning position.
Almost like on an individual level, I've done my bit.
That's it. It seems so selfish, but you know, surely everyone can understand that the ramifications are so far-reaching.
Yeah.
You know, that football, it messes with people's lives. It really does. And after failing the year before, to fail again would destroy summers, it would destroy careers, it would, you know, it'd have financial implications for the club, which means it has financial implications for the academy and the opportunity for the next level of people. And you're just like, It's like when you get relegated. You know, people just think it's about you. Of course, your stock goes down, but the actual impact on the club and the community and the prospects of the next generation and surrounding areas.
Do you think you're almost too wise and too aware as a player, in terms of the fact that you're thinking of the ramifications for the academy, for this person, for that person, for the community, the fact that all of that was going on in your head? We spoke with Martin Rowlands on a previous episode, and we asked him about nerves for Hillsborough. And he was like, no, he was going to go out and play. And it's almost like, in his head, it was just a game of football, let's go out and win it. And from your side, you were thinking about all the potential consequences of it not going to plan.
Yeah.
Do you think you're almost too aware of the ramifications?
Was I too aware? Everyone was aware of the ramifications. They are. Even Rowley was aware. But Rowley... The difference between he and I at that point in time is he had supreme confidence in what he was going to do and how he was going to do it. You know, and he knew that. I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew how I wanted to do it, but I was afraid of what you thought of what I was going to do. And I was afraid of what they thought about what I was going to do. Because whether I did my job or not was irrelevant to me, but what you thought was really important.
Wow.
So all of those lives that are affected, I wasn't too wise to the ramifications, but the ramifications for other people, they controlled my value. They controlled how worthy I felt myself as a human being, and that I couldn't cope with.
So how pleased were you when it went 2-0?
Oh, mate.
But I must ask you about the bus back. We spoke with Martin Rowlands about it. I know it was spoken about at the reunion, and there was a big party at the back of the bus, and I think Kev Gallen said at the front of the bus was Clarke Carlisle, and you just see cigar smoke coming up the top.
So again, this is how they evidenced to me that their consideration of the position that I was in, because I've been, sober for some 7 months now, and that was my first proper instance of genuine celebration or potential failure, where the footballing routine it's followed by drink, isn't it? You know, whether we'd have won or lost it, that would have been a hearty party, and they had 2 big dustbins filled with beer, and I think it was cider for Daisy. I think he was into cider at the time. You know, all these all packed with that at the back, and Birchie bought me a big pack of cigars, Hoy de Monterey's, big fat cigars. Anyway, go on, you get down the front with the driver, and. Just that consideration, it wasn't. They didn't shame or embarrass me, nor did they exclude me. Yeah, they wanted me to celebrate with them, just in a way that was suitable for me at that time, and that was for me to smoke on a team bus for the one and only time in my career.
Brilliant. Well, listen, it's been absolutely brilliant having a trip down memory lane with you. And since, from your point of view, it's great to hear these stories, and they're so varied about the same period from different people.
Well, I'm just sitting here sort of captivated by the stories, the journey that Clarke's been on, and I think it's an absolute inspiration for anyone that wants to hear what he went through, how he coped, how he's come out the other side, the standing he's felt within the game, and the Queen's Park Rangers, that bond he had with his teammates. I think it's absolutely brilliant, and
bless you, Andy. Thank you.
Excellent, brilliant, Clarke. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for being so honest as well. Some incredible stories there, as Sint says. And thanks very much for watching us as we've taken that trip down memory lane to 20 years ago and 03, 04, and we'll be back again soon.